We are trying to see how the private sector of Sri Lanka is also involved actually in the conservation of biodiversity. During my tenure in various organizations which have been dealing with environment, most of the time in biodiversity conservation was the prerogative of the state. And, it was always the Central Environmental Authority, the Department of Wildlife Conservation, the Forest Department, agencies that have a bearing on the biodiversity of Sri Lanka. But more and more, we are realizing that other sectors also have a bearing on this subject and on the biodiversity of Sri Lanka. And it is nice to see the corporate sector getting more and more involved in the conservation of biodiversity. Now, I think the video that was screened gave us an introduction to biodiversity, but I just like to show a little bit of, a twist in the definition. As we all know, and we have heard several times, biodiversity is the diversity of species on Earth, and it actually deals with even genetic diversity. It also deals with the species in the ecosystems. And the most important thing is that the new definitions start talking about underpinning the functioning of ecosystems and bringing in the societies and economies. Now, during, as I said, my previous, experience, biodiversity was totally conservation oriented. And, it was all about conserving the biodiversity. But today, we are looking at benefit sharing with societies, as well as bringing in an economic value to biodiversity, which is of paramount importance in the type of economy that we are dealing with. Now, we also have this terminology, natural capital, which actually refers to the stock of natural resources. And there again, it's like the capital we look at that we have reserved in a bank. So similarly, we have natural capital, which refers to forests, our soil, our water, our air, and all our biological resources. And of course, we have mineral resources underground. So the word natural capital has also crept up in the recent past where biodiversity is concerned. Now, talking about Sri Lanka, I think we all know that Sri Lanka is an island that is uniquely blessed with biodiversity, and it is extremely high compared to any other island of similar size or even larger. So we are a country that is blessed with unique biodiversity, and I think that is something that we really have to be cognizant about. Now, we also have got the big five. I mean, we all love to see the fauna that we have. And I think we always enjoy or get excited when we see herds of elephants. It is a very unique experience. And if you look at the month of August, we have the Min Area Park and the Kaudulla Park having herds and herds of elephants. And we have a lot of tourism happening in these areas. So the elephant is a common sight in our country, and it is one of the big five mammals that we have. So it's great that we have such a huge population of elephants, maybe about 6,000 in number. Now, among the big five, we also have got the bear, the sloth bear, a shyer animal than the elephants. I mean, you don't always see it. If you go on a visit to Yala, you might see it. You might be lucky to see it, but sometimes you may not. It's a shy animal, and very often you miss it. But the sloth bear is also a unique animal that we find within our natural systems. Then, of course, we have the majestic leopard. I mean, we all love to see this, and this one is in a very, very interesting pose, looking at, maybe its domain or, highly relaxed. And we see this kind of thing in our Yala National Park and in other national parks in the country. The Yala National Park is we have the largest population of leopard in perhaps Asia, and this is Panthera pardus scotia, which is a wonderful and unique animal that we see in our own national parks. Also, if you take the country, Sri Lanka has also got now all those animals I spoke of is in a terrestrial environment. We also have seas around us. We are blessed, we are an island blessed with a huge maritime environment, and our waters around our country is 8 times the size of its land extent. So we do have a huge diversity also in the waters around the island. Now, again, I mean, I think all of you may have visited Mirissa or maybe the eastern coast, where we have seen this blue whale. It is the Mirissa area is an area where you have a number of specimens of blue whale. We are very lucky to be able to see so many around our waters, and in the Mirissa area, the continental shelf is very close to the the coast. So within like about 2 hours, you'll be able to see many blue whales. And within, as we all say, within a matter of 3 hours, you'll be able to see the blue whale. And of course, you'll be able to see the leopards and the elephants. And that is the uniqueness of our country. So I just wanted to start by saying that we are in a very, very interesting and unique country, and we need to conserve our diversity. Now, looking at some of these, problems we have now, endemicity, I think you would probably all understand that the endemicity of Sri Lanka is very high. Endemic means that you find that particular species only in Sri Lanka. In our flowering plants, we have like 28% of the 894 specimens of flowering plants, 28% is endemic. Butterflies 10%, birds 15%. And as you go down the line, you'll find that the land snails of Sri Lanka, 88% is endemic. So if you do see a land snail somewhere, probably it is an endemic species. Amphibia, again, 86% of them are endemic. I mean, we have 95 species and 86% of them are endemic, which is absolutely fantastic. And amphibians are also very, very sensitive to changes in climate, and we probably have very sensitive species there where we have to safeguard them. And then 100% almost of our freshwater crabs are endemic to Sri Lanka. So from this, you can see not only do we have these, but we also have a lot of them are endemic to the country. Now, see the red lines that we have, and there again we find that most of these species that I spoke about are threatened, and having some kind of a threat, or looking, I mean, they are kind of on the path to extinction. So flowering plants 45%, butterflies 39%, going down the line. 88% of the crabs are also, this is, it's not a compliment really. The most of these species are are at a risk of extinction, or are in a state of threatened, because of the various anthropogenic effects that we have, like deforestation, land degradation. All these kinds of things are happening, and we sometimes, don't really realize that, we have this kind of an issue in the country. Okay, so now Sri Lanka is one of the global biodiversity hotspots. When you say it's a biodiversity hotspot, one means that it is having high biodiversity, but it's also declining at a fast rate. So it is the Sri Lanka wet zone of Sri Lanka is a global biodiversity hotspot, but it is also the biodiversity in that in this hotspot is also declining at a rapid rate, and that is also a problem that we have. Now, as I said to you at the beginning, the economic value of biodiversity is today something of great importance, because, as you know, we have a lot of ecosystem services because of biodiversity, and some of them, as you are well aware, are carbon storage, we have a huge problem with climate and excess carbon dioxide in the environment. So we have plants and plants storing carbon. Then we also ecosystems filter a lot of pollution and things. So water filtration happens because of biodiversity. I mean, mangrove swamps and, all these seagrass beds and places that we have, these ecosystems, they are very good filters, of pollution and things like that. Then it also provides us with food, as the video, rightly said. And also it contributes significantly to global economic value. So we have to realize that biodiversity has some kind of service, and the ecosystem services have been valued, and studies estimate that these services are worth over US dollars 150 trillion annually. So, I mean, this slide just shows you how important biodiversity is. And, without it, we would be in a worse situation than what we are. Bilateral environmental agreements that the globe or the countries signed. And Sri Lanka is also a signatory to various multilateral conventions that have a bearing on biodiversity. Some of them are the Convention on Biological Diversity, which you have heard of, the CBD, as it's often called. And we also have the Ramsar Convention, which is dealing with the wetlands. So we have several multilateral environmental agreements that Sri Lanka has signed. And, the whole globe is working towards this decline that I have been talking about. And then, of course, the corporate sector and all the people who probably are the participants here in this group have heard of Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, as they are more often called, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. They direct the governments and on how to deal with biodiversity loss, and it inspires societies also to take steps towards the conservation of biodiversity. So even though there is, this decline, people are doing something about it, and one of them, one way, is of course all of us working together through these multilateral environmental agreements on how biodiversity can be conserved. Now, also I want to mention here that biodiversity in these MEAs that I'm talking about is not really looking at conservation issues only. Biodiversity is not just for conservation, but we are looking at a social impact. And, their biodiversity is used very much by society, and also there is a lot of economic value to biodiversity, which I will illustrate later on in this presentation. So it's not just conservation as we have been trained to think. We are now looking at biodiversity as an economic use, as well as as a resource that the society can also use. Now, the most important framework under the CBD is what we call the Global Biodiversity Framework. Now, this is commonly called the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and it was at the conclusion of the 15th Conference of the Parties of the Convention on Biological Diversity. The Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework was signed up, and here we have 4 global goals, which will be hopefully achieved by 2050, and 23 targets, which perhaps will be reviewed, and people are looking at achieving these by 2030. Now, since Sri Lanka is a signatory to the biodiversity CBD, we also are working on the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and Sri Lanka is also looking at some of the targets that we can achieve to stall the loss of biodiversity. Now, when you talk of the Sustainable Development Goals, the more common ones that perhaps you have heard of is SDG 14, which is life on land, and SDG 15, which is life below water. So there are a host of others, like the climate there is SDG 11, I think, is on climate. And of course, we have SDG 17, which is on partnerships. So the SDGs also reflect the same sort of, interest as the Global Biodiversity Framework. And since we are more familiar with the SDGs, we work towards the targets that we have set ourselves under SDG 14 and SDG 15 in particular about the Sustainable Development Goals. And the private sector partners who are with me today would probably understand, because when they, they report against their, performance, like, for example, in the GRI, for example, they would be looking at their performance in terms of SDG 14, SDG 15, and, not so commonly known, the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And I must say that most of this is government-driven. The Global Biodiversity Framework, it's the Ministry of Environment that deals with it. And it has been one of the problems that we have in the work that I do is that the private sector has to also get more involved in looking at these targets and how we achieve them, because the private sector plays a lead role today in some of the biodiversity conservation activities. And you will see that later when I illustrate some of the things that happen. Now, again, this is, of course, just a slide that illustrates what I said. We are trying to be nature positive by 2030. We are trying to achieve some of the targets by 2030, and of course, full recovery, hopefully, by 2050. So these are, nice things to do and nice things to say, but whether we actually can do it is another story. So as you know, the Conference of the Parties meets once in 2 years, and we have a lot of discussion going on about meeting these targets. And as you know, we are having a COP, one of these in the month of November, where our country will also go and present what it's doing with respect to these targets, etc. Now, how we can, especially with regard to private sector, how do we achieve some of these things that we are talking about? Now, one is, of course, we can look at the most important thing that most of you are aware of. We are looking at conservation and restoration. We are looking at climate resilience and climate change. That's one of the biggest problems we have. Then it's one of the drivers of biodiversity loss. Sustainable production is important. I know a lot of companies today are looking at sustainable production and studying their value chains on how production can be made more sustainable. And one of the more important things, of course, reduce consumption. If we reduce our consumption patterns, then probably we can also stall some of the biodiversity losses and reverse the trend so that we can see how it's turning towards a more positive side of things. Now, as the video said, and as I also will reiterate, despite our attempts, to do all this, our species continue to decline, and many species have been pushed to the brink of extinction, and it is quite frightening sometimes that, we are, losing biodiversity at a very fast pace, and in Sri Lanka also, as well as in the globe. And more than 42,100 species are threatened with extinction, and there's still 28% of all assessed species. That's, all species on Earth are not assessed. Only 28% of all assessed species. You can see the numbers, how the species are on a decline, and most of them are threatened with extinction. So despite all the attempts we take, still biodiversity continues to be on a decline, and most of the species that we would love to see thriving are pushed to the brink of extinction. Now, here again, a little bit more detail about this Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Is looking at 4 goals, and what we are looking at is conserve, avoid. As I said, we must avoid, reduce consumption, safeguard, and of course we need to act. So these are the sort of basic trends that we have. We need to conserve, we need to avoid, which is also very important. We need to safeguard wherever it's needed, and we need to also act. And then, as you can see, the The little balls around those, are the 23 goals that we have. And, you get so many that, we need to actually, we have to look at these targets and then give our performance with respect to these targets. So every target has KPIs that we have set for ourselves, and we need to see how best we can achieve these. So I think for now, it would suffice to know that there is a global biodiversity framework, and which is currently ongoing. In 2050, it's looking at the full-blown work that we are trying to do would be fruitful, and in 2030, we are looking at safeguarding some of it. Now, the role of business. Now, since I'm trying to deal with business here, one of the most important targets is target 15, and that outlines the role of business and financial institutions in halting and reversing nature loss. So if you do want to refer the Global Biodiversity Framework, what you need to refer is target 15 if you're from the private sector, where it says that companies should get ready to assess and disclose their risks, impacts, and dependencies on biodiversity and reverse nature loss. Now, I know that in our work, we come across companies disclosing, and most of them disclose against the global, the GRI framework. Now, there are also other networks that, you can disclose against, and that's a science-based targets network. I know companies that are within the global compact in Sri Lanka are being capacity built on the SPT network, where they are looking at disclosing the loss, their impact on biodiversity. And there are hundreds of networks, these kinds of, frameworks that you can disclose against, which have been approved by the Convention on Biological Diversity. But most of the companies are looking at the science-based target network, which is now being looked at in a big way. So if you do want to find out a little bit more about that, you could get into the internet and just look at what the Science-Based Targets Network is talking about. And also there's a task force for nature-related financial disclosures, which is also important. So basically, the target 15 says that companies should assess and disclose their risks. So you can't just go on, like, for example, in our country, we have a large agricultural economy, we have tourism, we have mining, we have so many fisheries. These are all economies or sectors that have a bearing, plantation sector also, that have a bearing on biodiversity, and what the work that they do would have an impact on biodiversity. So basically, you're looking at understanding what your company is doing, looking at the material, which of these, impacts are significant to your company, and then start disclosing on what you're doing, or looking at the risk that is being placed by your activity, and also looking at how you could mitigate some of these impacts. So I think it's important that you understand that there are frameworks that look at reversing nature loss. And it is that now, and recently I was at a meeting at the Ministry of Environment, where they were trying to outline the discussions with the private sector on how Target 15 can be institutionalized or implemented in the country. So they are beginning to look at it, and very soon it might be even at the moment, of course, it's all voluntary, but who knows, it might become mandatory in the future, because the government can frame legislation so that companies should then disclose their impacts on biodiversity and look at how to reverse the trends. Now I don't know what happened to this. Yeah. So basically what you need to look at is, now if you are trying to look at a change, you have to first understand the process of change, and look at how you need to look at halting the loss of biodiversity. So in Sri Lanka, we have a lot of blue chip companies but you all know that most of our companies are small and medium enterprises or even micro MSMEs. So, some of them after COVID and all these things, most of these smaller companies are first trying to survive. So here we are talking about, looking at the impact they have on biodiversity, which might not be exactly what, they would like to hear. So we have got collectively, the SMEs have a bigger impact on biodiversity than some of the larger companies that we work with. So I think our efforts should really go towards supporting the SMEs. And as I said, some of these science-based target networks and all these other, frameworks that we have to for disclosure may not be easily understood by the SME sector. So we are looking at simplifying some of these things and looking at nationalizing some of these, frameworks where the SMEs can be also capacity built, and also link them up to the lending organizations, because most of these SMEs, they go to banks, etc., for lending. And then at that point, they do environmental assessments. And then at that point, some support can be given to the SMEs to look at their biodiversity risks as well. So once you understand the loss in biodiversity or from whatever industry that you're working on, you must look at how to prevent. And that's the next thing that we look at. So we look at the risk factor and then try and identify the drivers that we have, that lead to the biodiversity loss because of our, activity. And then, of course, we need to prepare recovery plans and implement the recovery plans. So there are many companies doing this kind of thing. And I must say, I'm closely involved with companies that work on biodiversity conservation. And a lot of companies that we work with are doing and understanding their impact on biodiversity, and also implementing some recovery plans together with the science-based organizations that are there today to assist these companies. So all this is not it's not just some writing, it's actually practiced. And as I want to again reiterate that the bigger problem we have is with the small and medium enterprises, and not the larger companies that are in existence. Now, biodiversity plan, inclusive planning is an important thing, and it's a critical requirement for Sri Lanka. Many of the emerging issues that affect biodiversity arise from poor planning. We have a country that is very, it has a huge, population. Most of our, and we have a very small country, and we have quite a percentage of the country also under protection. So there's very little land area for people to use, or for for development processes to go on. And one of the biggest problems is that we lack planning, and I suppose it becomes important for companies to know where the problematic areas are where biodiversity is concerned. And most of it is lying in government organizations, and very often companies do not know where it is critical, and this information, if it's available somewhere in a database or something, it becomes so much easier for companies to know where the risks are. So plans need to be improved and mainstreamed, and that is something that we are working on closely. For example, a lot of we have a mangrove cover in Sri Lanka. As you know, mangroves have the potential to sequester a high amount of carbon, which is important in our climate consultations. And companies are interested to restore some of these mangroves. But the Forest Department, under whose jurisdiction the mangrove cover is unable to tell us exactly where the restoration should be done. And I think if there is better planning, it might be useful for companies to know where such activity can be, done. Now, one of the things is that we have an important document that perhaps you can also lay your hands on, and that is the National Biodiversity Strategic Action Plan, which every country has to prepare. And it is called the NBSAP. It is available. It is being looked at now because its current period is over. And And in this revision, there will be specifically some areas that so the private sector can also get involved in helping the country to achieve its National Biodiversity Strategic Action Plan. Now, in this plan, in a recent study, a project, the Biodiversity Finance Project of the UNDP, did some studies on how much finance is available with government to implement this Biodiversity Strategic Action Plan. And it was found that quite a bit of it is there isn't enough funding. As you know, the country is going through an economic crisis, and as such, the private sector also needs to put in some funding to achieve this NBSAP that Sri Lanka has. Then, as you know, restoration becomes an important thing. A number of restoration projects have been carried out successfully by the state and the private sector. It is happening now, and one of the things that one of the targets that is there under the Global Biodiversity Framework is that 30% of the degraded land is restored. So a number of companies, I mean, you possibly know some of them, are successfully doing a lot of restoration. It's not just the state only, but we need to mainstream these activities, and a national restoration plan with some funds to implement it should also be put forward. Now, we also have not only the land, but we also have the sea, and we have we have achieved quite a bit of targets on our land, but as you know, we lagged very far behind in the marine protected area network that we have. We have a large extent of marine areas, but our PA network in the marine realm is far from enough, and we need to make it more representative. The terrestrial area is well mapped out, and we have our PA system well done, but not so much for our marine areas. So that's another thing that we need to do soon, and we need to manage these PAs. Then we also have a lot of fragmentation. Now you can see in this map, you get the green cover, but because of the development processes going on, there is a lot of fragmentation that is happening, which is also quite sad to see. And we need to look at connectivity in the work that we do. Now, I know that you all would love to hear some good stories and some positive vibes. And, I just quickly looked at some experiences that I have had with the private sector in biodiversity related mainstreaming biodiversity and looking at conservation efforts. One such example I work with closely is the INSEE cement company that, as you know, is a quarry. It has a huge quarry, and when you mine for limestone, which they do for the manufacture of cement, they ruin quite a bit of the environment. Now, for the last 10 or 15 years, INSEE, which was previously called Holcim, and then later on it became Siam City Cement, is now the brand. It's branded as INSEE. They have done with IUCN a large restoration activity in their quarries. They restore, they mine, and they restore. They mine and they restore, which is really nice to see. And you really get a very good example of nature positive work that is happening. It's a really good example. If you ever get a chance, do go and see their restoration efforts, and it's a really wonderful experience. So the endemics are back. They are looking at replanting. They are looking at native species. They have a lot of support from IUCN Sri Lanka, which is really supporting this whole thing. Then another really nice example where biodiversity is bringing some money back to the plantation sector. In Kalani Valley Plantations has got this Halgolla Biodiversity Refugium. It is Halgolla Estate is very, very highly biodiverse. It is declared as one of the most biodiverse plantations that Sri Lanka has. And in that, we have a large number of threatened of endemic species, which is really has been studied and mapped. And Kalani Valley Plantations has actually won awards for preserving this huge biodiversity refugium that is in existence there. Now, what they have done is, because when you have these very high biodiversity, diverse refugia, you find that you don't want a large number of people tramping there to look at some of these things because they are so sensitive. And what they have done is they are looking at high-end tourism in this Halgolle estate, where they are going to charge tourists who are really, it's a niche market. They are going to charge them for coming in here and doing research under certain conditions. So this is where the plantation company has understood the value of biodiversity in their estate and are trying to turn that into a new source of financing. So it's a new biodiversity financing mechanism that is being looked at by Halgolle Estate, Kalani Valley Plantations belonging to Haley's. Then going back into an international company, now Shell also is a huge, it mines for fuel resources. And there again, you see in their policies, they respect nature, and they have adopted several ambitious targets where new projects in areas rich in biodiversity will have a net positive impact on biodiversity. And nature-based solutions projects have been introduced in their various mining grounds for oil and gas, and they are a leading industry which has now shown that new biodiversity policies and strategies can really be introduced in their companies. Coming back to Sri Lanka, as you all must have heard or seen in newspapers and all that about the 300-kilometer walking trail that we have in the Central Highlands. It is very unique, and again, something that can draw tourism. It's looking at sustainable tourism. And here again, this trail is having plantations on either side, and the companies are supporting ensuring the biodiversity remains in those areas, looking at how to conserve the biodiversity, because actually, if not for that, there wouldn't be any trail there and there would be nothing to see. So therefore, again, making money on sustainable tourism. You would have heard about this new trail that we have, and it is something really interesting because it's a multi-partner project. It's 300 kilometers. So obviously you traverse through a lot of plantation areas in this in the Central Highlands, very biodiverse area of the country, whereby you can, where again the country can benefit by charging by ensuring that the tourism that is invited into these areas is sustainable. Then we also know about the Peak Ridge Forest Corridor. Again, a very, very biodiverse area, leopard-friendly country, whereby so much of upcountry leopard is seen in these areas. The upcountry leopard is really nice to see because they have a lot of fur, because they have to adapt themselves to this cool climate. And there again, in this Peak Ridge Corridor, it's a private sector-led corridor that has been, declared. And it is the resplendent Ceylon, where the Ceylon tea trails, the tourism, the facilities are there. And there they have now done the Forest Ridge corridor, which is now again being used as a leopard conservancy, where people can actually go to, see these, animals, and also support in the plantation sector again, whereby this has been done. Now, I would be failing in my duty if I don't talk to a little bit about Biodiversity Sri Lanka. This is an organization that is led by the private sector. It works on conserving biodiversity with the private sector. And we have something like 90+ members who are working on conservation issues and making it an opportunity for them in, restoring Sri Lanka's degraded biodiverse habitats. Now, one such project is the one we do, a multi-partner project. 10 companies know who they are. They're working on the Kannelia Conservation Forest, a highly degraded forest with invasive species, which is completely covered by Kakilla mat. And today, the 10 companies have restored this plot. And as you can see a mild succession already. And finally, I suppose the aim is to connect these to the fragmented corridors in the Carnelia Conservation Forest. Now, so many lessons learned here because we have now understood how to do restoration. It's very expensive as well in rough terrain. And it is being done as a public-private community partnership. The Forest Department is taking the lead. IUCN is doing the science work, and Biodiversity Sri Lanka works with its membership. So basically, it is an example whereby a multi-partner project has taken steps to, conserve Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has high wet zone again. Carnelia is in the wet zone, and it is a very, very highly biodiverse area. Now, the interesting thing is that when we started working here, there was zero endemism, and today there is a huge butterfly population. There are other species coming in and coming into the site, and it is really wonderful to see and heartwarming to see how you can, restore an area which has been degraded. Similarly, another project that is happening is Life to Our Mangroves, where 10 companies again is rehabilitating a mangrove cover which was there previously. And as you know, many years ago, Carson's did some shrimp farming, and most of these areas were completely ruined. So now this area is being restored. Again, a very difficult project because the soil is acidic, and you cannot use it to just plant mangroves. So we have to restore the soil. We have a lot of contour mapping to do. Restoration is not easy. It is a rather difficult process, which has to be it's all science based. It's not like dumping a mangrove plant in the middle of a brackish water and expecting it to grow. It's not like that. There is a lot of science behind these. The Mayamba University is helping us with this project. And again, 10 companies are working on this and reporting on the successes that they have achieved. So a few examples. I mean, I have so many more, and it's really interesting to see how countries, transforming itself, and the private sector is getting more and more involved in the conservation of biodiversity. And I just like to finally say that biodiversity is not the business of the government. It is not the business of the society. It's not the business of the private sector. It's everybody's business. Otherwise, we will not have all these uniqueness in the country. We will lose the provisioning services and the ecosystem services that biodiversity provides. We will have many climatic catastrophes, which are also linked to the biodiversity loss that we have. And we will be very, having a difficult time. So, I mean, this is just an outline of what is happening. Perhaps you may be having other examples in your mind, which also can add to this conversation. And I just like to thank you for listening and also to ask me any questions that you have, or clarifications, or share your stories, because it would be lovely to know what you do and how we can work together. So thank you, Dinushika. That's all I have to say.
Okay, madam, thank you very much. Now is the perfect time to engage with our audience. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them now.
Just speak up. I can see someone has raised a hand.
Yeah, Shiranee, thank you very much for a very nice and very, elaborated presentation that I studied a lot. I'm Dr. Shiranee Yasaratne, a traffic engineer from University. I'm working in the Master Engineering Consultants. I actually recently published a paper also regarding this. What is your, opinion and, advice that you can give to, stop this devastation in river bodies in Ratnapur district? There you can see a lot of, I am not telling that it's unauthorized, it is inappropriate gem mining. It has made, big impact to our river bodies, especially Kaluganga and Kuruganga. If you go there, you can see, even at the Google Maps, you can see it's like all colorful, silted water. Even we can't have, river bath there. It is very rare. If you want to have a, river bath there, you have to go up to somewhere, on top of the Opatal, somewhere, entire area is, this is ruined by few people. I know that. I'm also from Ratnapura. My origin is Ratnapura. And I am very much aware that how it was like in 1970s, 80s, and 90s like that. So who is responsible for this and what we can do? You have mentioned that, in the UN convention and all, and it is mentioned that water bodies and, the industries, especially this gem mining is a mining industry. So are the people, authorized to do this in this manner? You can see if you go to the Google Earth.
I have dealt with this when I was working at the Central Environmental Authority, whereby most of this, now, if you know the National Environmental Act, the Act allows for environmental impact assessments, which is necessary for large extents of mining. So, as you know, the EIA process gives you the numbers and says more than so many hectares. Then you need to go through the EIA or the IE process. Now, in these cases, most of them are small scale. A lot of them are illegal. I found that some of them just happen overnight, where people go there and quickly do the mining, and the next morning it's all done. So I think that, again, it's a small and medium enterprises problem that we have. And it is something that is a huge impact on aquatic fauna and flora, on which benthic organisms, whereby, as you say, it's a huge issue that we have. And I think the CEA has a role to play. The local authorities have a role to play. But as you know, unfortunately, in Sri Lanka, a little bit of money here and there helps to get these things off the ground. So unless there's vigilance, and especially by the citizens and also the NGOs that we have, this kind of problem has been going on for the last 30 years or so. So it is not an easy one to solve.
Yeah, is it recoverable sometimes, if they
very difficult recovery of these ecosystems? Now, I was just talking about the mangroves and, the other, the Carnelia project that we have, it's only 12 hectares. And we have invested 34 million rupees there already. So nature is looking after it with at no cost. So restoration is a very expensive process. And similarly, the mangrove restoration also is costing us about 40 million rupees. So, these things, you can ruin them, but getting them back on track. And the huge problem we have is invasive alien species. Because once an ecosystem is taken over and gets degraded, then the invasive IAS comes into play. And then it becomes very difficult. Now, in Carnelia, the whole place is covered with cattle. So similarly, in these riverine areas, there can be invasive species. Then the native fishes and a lot of our freshwater fishes are endemic to Sri Lanka, and a lot of them have been extinct. If you look at Dr. Petiagoda's book, you'll know how many aquatic, fishes that are endemic to Sri Lanka, and the rate of loss of the fish populations which are endemic is very, very high in the country. So we don't realize, by doing this kind of thing, how short-sighted we are in these rapid mining and, these kinds of things. They can be controlled and done in a methodical manner, but unless they are controlled properly and illegal mining is not stopped, it will continue to be rampant, and it's a real huge problem.
Some mines are like more than 1 kilometer length and 1 kilometer wide like that.
Yeah, I've been to the place and I've seen it all. Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe you can, work together with some NGOs or some, the local authority, bring the police in. If it's, illegal, there are licenses that need to be got for this kind of thing. The Gem and Jewelry Authority issues the licenses.
One person I know that there is having 17 illegal licenses there. He's one of the gem miner. One of my friends actually. I don't want, go and complain. But I put some particles in this one and in the paper. But I want to have, more strength to do something. Thank you.
Can support in any way you want. Any other questions?
I will contact you. Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, sure.
Madam, I have a suggestion, or Madam,
Yes.
I have a,
Can you identify
I don't
yourself,
know,
please?
yeah. Now, while some of you organizations are mandatory, also voluntary, there are mandatory organizations like the UDA who are regulating the laws legal, right?
Yes.
Until you become mandatory, the biggest problem I see is Sri Lanka. We don't have coordination between all these institutions. Like the biggest threat I see to diversity, loss of biodiversity, is the land fragmentation, and the biggest culprit is the UDA, who has decided the total of Sri Lanka you can subdivide to very small plots anywhere in the country, irrespective of biodiversity hotspots in Sri Lanka, right? Now, my suggestion is, why can't you all push the people like UDA to stop this ridiculous law, and then at least identify the biodiversity hotspots, and then push them to start a legal framework of stopping these. While some other few companies are pushing for biodiversity, most of the companies are for money, like lands, fragmentation,
Mining is
selling,
one
and
big
land
thing.
sale.
Hmm.
Yeah. So my
Oh.
suggestion is, why don't you all push for legal process and then identify what can be done, which don't need finances. You don't need finances to do these things.
Now,
So
the PA system is well, they belong to either the Forest Department or the Department of Wildlife Conservation. The buffer zones are well marked. So we know those are, if anything happens in those areas, then of course those agencies can take people. And, as you know, even the UDA, when they have to do something, they superimpose that particular development on the PA map. And then they will see that, certain areas are no-go zones, and, they are not, able to do anything there. But a lot of things happen again, because as you say, there are so many agencies involved, and UDA, wildlife, forestry, all these agencies, the marine area has so many different agencies that, so, I mean, I think there are some 30 agencies that look after the natural resources system in the country. Now, one case in point is a Veditalatiu issue. As you know, in that, in Mana district, where you get this pristine mangrove, cover, suddenly you get a degazetting, which is done by the wildlife, minister, whereby some areas are degazetted from the main, PA that has been established there for possibly shrimp farming. So one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing. And like you say, there's so much fragmentation in the agencies concerned. So one little process that we have, which actually looks after that, is the environmental impact assessment process, whereby agencies should work together in looking at the development projects that, are being mooted by even the private sector or the government or anything like that. But they are large scale. The EIA process only applies to large scale projects. And like the gentleman spoke about the, small mining problems, they are not covered by the law. So, unless these are large scale, there is a difficulty. So, I mean, agencies also, they have a role to play. And if they don't do what they're supposed to do, and don't map. Now, as I said, even the mangrove areas are not mapped. And unless the forest department comes up with a map and says, these are the areas that are, suitable for rehabilitation, these are the methodologies that have to be, because rehabilitation in one place is different to rehabilitation in another, because Sri Lanka is so unique in its diversity. So they should, I mean, the methodologies for restoration and rehabilitation should also be, put out in guidelines and things, So the agencies also, I agree with you totally that agencies also have a role to play in I said today. Dinushika, if there are no other questions, shall we close or?
Yes, ma'am. I think we can wind up the session now. Dear Madam, your contributions to our great talk were invaluable. Your clear and insightful presentation resonate with well with our audience, providing practical knowledge and actionable steps for fostering sustainability. We deeply appreciate your impactful contribution and look forward to future collaborations aimed at furthering our green initiatives together. Dear Madam, thank you once again for your valuable contribution. Dear all, thank you for being a wonderful audience today. Your engagement has truly enriched our session. Good night. Stay safe, all of you. Thank you, ma'am.